My name is Megan, and I am 31 years old. What I am about to tell you is a story about how the people who were supposed to love and support me the most became the architects of a plan to undermine me professionally, whispering lies to my boss in the hopes that I would fail. What happened next, and how I fought back, changed my life forever. If you have ever felt like you were battling against the people who should have been in your corner, please tell me where you are listening from in the comments below, and hit the like button if you can relate to the crushing feeling of familial betrayal. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about overcoming toxic relationships and finding your own strength. From the moment I was a little girl, I felt like I existed under a magnifying glass in my own family. It wasn't just scrutiny. It was an active, almost competitive observation of my every move, always filtered through a lens of skepticism. My mother, my older sister Sarah, and my Aunt Carol were the main players in this dynamic. My father was quieter, more distant, often seeming uncomfortable with the emotional intensity that swirled around the women in his life, and he rarely intervened. It was a subtle thing at first, easily dismissed as just how they were. A raised eyebrow when I talked about a dream. A pointed question about whether I was sure I was capable of something. Gentle, dripping suggestions that perhaps my reach exceeded my grasp. I remember vividly wanting to join the school debate club in middle school. I was shy, but I was passionate about certain topics, and I practiced arguing points with my reflection in the mirror. When I mentioned it at the dinner table, hoping for a simple "that's nice, Megan," or "good luck," I instead got a round of hesitant sighs. "Debate club, Megan?" my mother asked, her voice soft but edged with doubt. "Are you sure you're ready for that? You're so quiet. Maybe you should try something less confrontational," my sister Sarah added, not unkindly, but with that familiar tone of suggesting I lower my aspirations. My Aunt Carol, who was visiting that night, chimed in, "Some people just aren't built for that kind of pressure, dear. It's all right to know your limits." It was never a direct prohibition. It was this constant, insidious suggestion that my limits were lower than I perceived them to be. It chipped away at my confidence, making every step I took feel like I was walking on thin ice. I often second-guessed myself, internalizing their doubts until they became my own. I started choosing paths that seemed safer, less likely to invite their quiet disapproval or, worse, their prediction of failure. College was a period of temporary reprieve. I moved away, and the physical distance provided a buffer. I studied hard, made friends who saw me for who I was without the family filter, and started to build a sense of self-worth independent of their opinions. But the gravitational pull of family is strong, and after graduation, I moved back closer to my hometown. The old patterns re-emerged, even stronger now that I was an adult making adult decisions. My first few jobs were modest, entry-level positions that didn't seem to register on their radar much beyond a paycheck. There wasn't much room for ambition or perceived risk in data entry or basic administrative support. They seemed content with that, perhaps because it fit their quiet narrative of my capabilities. The shift happened when I decided I wanted more. I had been working in a large corporation for about 3 years, still in an administrative role, but I had been quietly taking online courses, learning new software, and networking within the company. An opportunity came up in a different department, a project management role. It was a significant step up, requiring more responsibility, leadership, and visibility. It felt like a chance to finally prove to myself, and maybe even to them, that I was capable of more. Getting that job was one of the proudest moments of my life. I had worked incredibly hard on the application and interviews. The hiring manager, a woman named Mr. Harrison, was known for being tough but fair, someone who valued competence and dedication. When she called to offer me the position, I was ecstatic. I couldn't wait to tell my family. I thought, naively, that this concrete achievement, this validation from an outside professional entity, would finally change their tune. I called my mother first. "Mom, I got the project management job." I remember practically shouting into the phone, bubbling with excitement. There was a pause. Not a surprised pause, but a thoughtful, almost calculating one. "Oh," she said finally. "That's nice, dear. Is that what you really want to be doing?" The immediate dampening effect was palpable. It wasn't a celebratory response. It was a questioning of my choice, a subtle insertion of doubt. Yes, Mom, I worked really hard for it. It's a great opportunity. A big step up. Well, she sighed faintly. It sounds very stressful. A lot of responsibility. Do you think you're ready for all that pressure? My sister Sarah was similar. When I told her, her response was mixed with what sounded like genuine happiness, mixed with a familiar undercurrent of caution. Wow, Megan, that's great, she said. Then, but project management? Isn't that, like, super demanding? Long hours? Are you sure you can handle it? It was the "are you sure you can handle it" that always stung the most. It was the echo of every time they had suggested I wasn't quite enough, not quite ready, not quite capable. The reactions from my mother and sister were disheartening, but it was my Aunt Carol's response that set the stage for the true betrayal. Aunt Carol was my mother's sister, a woman who had always seemed to take a particular interest in my life, though never in a way that felt supportive. Her interest felt more like surveillance. She was highly critical, often comparing me unfavorably to my cousins, or even herself at my age. When she heard about the job, her reaction was the most overtly negative yet. "A project manager?" she repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. When my mother relayed the news during a family call, I was also on. "Megan? Oh, I don't see that lasting long." That phrase. I don't see that lasting long. It wasn't just doubt. It was a prediction. A hope, almost, of my failure. It sent a cold shiver down my spine, a premonition of their true feelings. They didn't just doubt me, they actively anticipated my stumbling. I started the new job filled with a potent mix of excitement and that familiar, family-induced anxiety. I was determined to succeed, not just for myself, but to silence the little voices of doubt they had planted in my head and maybe, just maybe, earn a genuine nod of approval. Mr. Harrison, my boss, was exactly as described. Professional, demanding, and incredibly sharp. She expected results and professionalism. I worked tirelessly. I was the first one in the office and often the last one to leave. I immersed myself in the projects, learned the dynamics of the team, and tried to anticipate challenges before they arose. I felt like I was finally finding my stride, proving that I was, in fact, ready for the pressure. About 2 months into the role, I started noticing something subtle but unsettling. Mr. Harrison's demeanor towards me seemed to shift. It wasn't overtly negative, but there was a coolness, a reservedness that hadn't been there before. Our one-on-one meetings felt less collaborative and more like I was constantly being assessed, under extra scrutiny. She would ask pointed questions about my ability to handle stress, my organizational skills, and my communication style, questions that seemed oddly out of context with my actual performance, which I believed was strong. I brushed it off at first. Maybe she was just testing me. Maybe this was her management style. But the feeling persisted, a low hum of unease beneath the surface of my workday. My colleagues seemed fine, friendly enough, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with my direct manager. Then, one afternoon, the puzzle pieces clicked into place in the most shocking way imaginable. I was getting coffee in the break room when I overheard 2 colleagues talking in hushed tones by the microwave. They didn't see me initially, tucked around a corner. "Can you believe it?" one whispered. "After everything?" "Right," the other replied. "I mean, talking to the boss like that. Just incredible." My heart started to pound. What were they talking about? "Yeah, Mr. Harrison was apparently pretty rattled," the first colleague continued. "Said Megan's family called her, trying to tank her before she even got properly started. Claiming she's unreliable, can't handle pressure, emotional. All sorts of crazy stuff." I froze, the coffee cup slipping in my suddenly numb fingers. Megan's family? Calling Mr. Harrison? Claiming I was unreliable and emotional? The blood drained from my face.
It couldn't be. No. My family wouldn't do something like that.
Not actively sabotage my job by talking to my boss. That was too cruel, too overtly malicious, even for them. I backed away quietly, retreating to my desk in a daze. My hands were trembling. The overheard snippets replayed in my mind. Megan's family called her, trying to tank her. Unreliable, can't handle pressure, emotional, it was their language. The same doubts they had always voiced, but weaponized, directed at the very person who held my professional future in her hands. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. The subtle shift in Mr. Harrison's attitude, the pointed questions, it all made sickening sense now. She hadn't just been testing me, she had been assessing whether the things my family said about me were true. I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. Shock, disbelief, profound hurt, and then a burning, furious indignation.
How could they?
How could the people who were supposed to be my support system actively try to destroy something so important to me? It was a betrayal of the deepest kind. It wasn't just gossip or casual negativity. It was a calculated attempt to sabotage my livelihood and my reputation. I spent the rest of that day in a blur. I don't know how I got through the work. My mind was reeling, trying to process the enormity of what I had learned. Who exactly had called Mr. Harrison? My mother? My sister? My Aunt Carol? It didn't really matter. They were a unit in their perception of me, and any one of them speaking like that felt like all of them speaking. That evening, I knew I couldn't let this go. I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. My first instinct was to confront my family immediately, to demand answers and explanations. But another part of me, the part that had learned caution and strategic thinking in my new role, knew I needed to approach this carefully. My job was on the line. I needed to talk to Mr. Harrison first. The next morning felt like walking into a storm. I requested a private meeting with Mr. Harrison, my hands clammy, my stomach twisting into knots. I didn't know how much she knew or how much she believed. My career felt incredibly fragile at that moment, hanging on the threads of my family's cruel words. When I sat in her office, the silence felt deafening. Mr. Harrison looked at me with her usual professional gaze, but I thought I detected a hint of something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe just tiredness. "Megan," she said, her voice even. "You wanted to see me?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding against my ribs. I decided to be direct. The overheard conversation hadn't given me specifics on what was said, only that family members had called and said negative things. "Mr. Harrison," I began, my voice trembling slightly despite my efforts to keep it steady.
I
learned something yesterday that has deeply upset me, and I feel I need to address it with you directly. It involves my family. Her expression didn't change, but she gave a small nod, signaling me to continue. "I understand," I said, choosing my words carefully, "that one or more members of my family contacted you recently." Mr. Harrison leaned back in her chair, her eyes fixed on mine. She didn't confirm or deny it immediately. "Go on," she prompted. I understand that during that contact they made some statements about me." I continued, the words feeling incredibly difficult to push out. Statements that were not supportive, and may have painted a negative picture of my capabilities or character. Mr. Harrison remained silent for a long moment. The tension in the room was thick. I felt exposed, vulnerable, laying bare this deeply painful family dynamic to my professional superior. Finally, she spoke. "Megan, yes. I did receive some unexpected calls from individuals identifying themselves as your relatives shortly after you started in this role." My breath hitched. It was true. It was actually true. "They expressed," Mr. Harrison continued, her tone measured, "concerns about your suitability for the project management position. They cited things like your inability to handle stress, a tendency towards emotional reactions under pressure, and suggested you might be unreliable or easily overwhelmed." The details, even filtered through her professional summary, were devastating. These were the exact narratives they had woven about me my entire life. And they had delivered them directly to my boss, packaging their personal doubts and judgments as objective truth. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice firmer now, fueled by the clarity of the hurt. "What they told you, those things are not true. Not about my professional self, and frankly, not even entirely true about my personal self, but they certainly do not reflect how I approach my work." I swallowed, trying to compose myself. "My family. We have a complicated dynamic. There's a history of Let's say, a lack of faith in my abilities from certain members. They have always been very critical, very quick to doubt me whenever I've tried to step outside a very narrow box they seem to want to put me in. I paused, gathering my courage. This sounds unbelievable, I know, but I believe their intention in contacting you was to actively discourage you from keeping me in this role, to make me fail. Mr. Harrison was watching me intently. I couldn't read her expression. Was she believing me? Did she think I was making excuses?
Megan, she said.
Let me be frank. Receiving calls like that about a new employee is highly unusual. And yes, it did give me pause. I took what they said into consideration. It's why I've been perhaps observing your performance more closely than I might otherwise have. My stomach clenched. So it had affected her initial perception. The damage had been done. However, she continued, and I leaned forward, hope flickering. What they described does not align with the employee I have seen these past 2 months. Your work has been exemplary. You've handled multiple projects under tight deadlines with professionalism and efficiency. You've demonstrated excellent organizational skills, clear communication, and a remarkable ability to stay calm and focused under pressure. You've shown initiative and a strong work ethic. Relief washed over me so powerfully, I felt lightheaded.
She saw it. She saw me.
She hadn't just believed their narrative. Frankly, Mr. Harrison said, a hint of steel entering her voice, your performance has not only met but exceeded my expectations for someone new in this role. Especially given the context. She paused, looking at me with a look that was softer than I had ever seen from her. Megan, I don't know the specifics of your family dynamic, but I do know professional competence. And you have demonstrated it repeatedly. Whatever their reasons were for contacting me, their assessment of your professional capabilities is demonstrably false based on your performance here. I felt tears welling up. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief and vindication. This was the validation I had craved my entire life, not from my family, but from a respected professional who had seen through the negativity and judged me solely on my merits. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you for seeing my work and not just listening to them. She nodded. Your work speaks for itself, Megan. Keep doing what you're doing. And if you have any further disturbances from outside influences related to your employment here, you are to report them to me immediately. This workplace is not a forum for personal grievances from your relatives. I left her office feeling like I could fly. The fear that had been a tight knot in my chest for weeks had loosened its grip. My job wasn't just safe. I was thriving, and my boss knew the truth. She knew about the betrayal, and she had chosen to believe in my work over their words. But the conversation with Mr. Harrison was only half of it. I still had to confront my family. This was the harder part, the one I had dreaded my whole life. Truly standing up to them, exposing their behavior, and setting boundaries. I decided to confront them individually at first, starting with my mother. I called her later that day, my heart heavy but resolute. Mom, I said, skipping the usual small talk. We need to talk about the calls you made to my boss. Silence on the other end. A long, guilty silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice small. I don't know what you're talking about, Megan. The denial, the immediate defensiveness, fueled my anger. Yes, you do, Mom. Mr. Harrison told me she received calls from family members shortly after I started, raising concerns about my ability to do my job. I know it was you or Sarah or Aunt Carol. Probably all of you coordinating. Another silence. Then a sigh. Well, we were just worried about you, Megan, she said, the classic deflection. That job sounds like a lot. We didn't want you to take on too much and fail. Worried about me? I repeated, my voice rising. Is that what you call it? Calling my boss behind my back and filling her head with doubts about me? That's not worry, Mom. That's sabotage. You were trying to make me fail.
No.
No, that's not fair, she protested, her voice gaining strength. We know you. You get stressed easily. We were trying to give her a realistic picture, so she wouldn't expect too much. A realistic picture? I scoffed, the sound sharp even to my own ears. Or a picture that fits your narrative of who you think I am. You didn't want me to succeed, did you? You wanted me to stay small, stay in a job you understood, stay reliant on you. The conversation devolved from there. She became defensive, then tearful, claiming I was being unfair, that she only had my best interests at heart, that I was overreacting. It was the same cycle of emotional manipulation I had experienced my whole life. She couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge the malicious intent behind her actions. My conversation with Sarah was similar, though less emotionally charged. She admitted they had discussed calling my boss and that she had agreed it might be a good idea to give Mr. Harrison a heads up about my sensitivities. She didn't see it as harmful, just managing expectations. This lack of awareness, this inability to see the impact of their actions, was almost as frustrating as the actions themselves. Confronting Aunt Carol was the most difficult. She was unapologetic, even defiant. "Honestly, Megan," she said flatly when I confronted her, "someone needed to give that woman a heads up.
You're simply not cut out for a job like that.
It's too much for you." I was doing her a favor, and frankly, I was doing you a favor. You'll thank me when you're back in a job that doesn't send you into a tailspin. Her blatant disregard for my feelings or my professional competence was stunning. She genuinely believed she was right, that her limited, outdated view of me was the objective truth, and that everyone, including my boss, should adhere to it. These conversations, while painful, were also incredibly clarifying. They confirmed that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern of behavior rooted in their own insecurities, fears, or perhaps a need to control my trajectory. Their doubts weren't about my reality. They were about their perception, which they were intent on imposing on the world, even on my employer. Knowing the full extent of their actions and hearing their justifications or lack thereof solidified my resolve. I couldn't change them. I couldn't make them see me differently or suddenly become supportive. What I could change was how I interacted with them and how much power I gave their opinions. Over the following months, I focused relentlessly on my job. The initial fear was replaced by a fierce determination. Every success felt like a small victory, not just for my career, but for my sense of self-worth. I poured all my energy into my projects, used the tools and skills I had learned, and continued to exceed expectations. Mr. Harrison, true to her word, was incredibly supportive. She became a mentor, recognizing my potential and giving me opportunities to take on more challenging assignments. Within 6 months, I wasn't just doing well, I was excelling. I successfully managed 2 major cross-departmental projects, delivered them ahead of schedule and under budget, and received glowing feedback from colleagues and clients. At the company's quarterly review, I was publicly recognized as the top performer in our department. Mr. Harrison praised my dedication, resilience, and exceptional project management skills. Standing there, accepting that recognition, knowing what my family had tried to do, was the sweetest form of vindication. My success became the undeniable answer to their doubts and sabotage. It wasn't loud or confrontational in the way my initial calls had been, but it was a powerful, quiet declaration that their judgment of me was wrong. As my professional life thrived, I started implementing serious boundaries in my personal life with my family. It wasn't easy. There was resistance, guilt trips, and accusations of me being cold or ungrateful. But I held firm. I limited contact, especially with Aunt Carol. Conversations were kept brief and superficial, focused on neutral topics. Any hint of criticism, doubt, or attempts to micromanage my life was met with a firm redirection or an early end to the call or visit. I stopped sharing details about my job or my aspirations. They had proven they couldn't be trusted with that information. It was a painful realization, acknowledging that the people who should have been my biggest cheerleaders were, in fact, a liability to my well-being and success. The dynamic in the family shifted. Some members, like my father and a few cousins, seemed to slowly acknowledge my success and capability, perhaps seeing the undeniable evidence for themselves. But the core group, my mother, sister, and aunt, never truly apologized or acknowledged the harm they had caused. They couldn't. To do so would be to admit they were wrong about me, to dismantle the narrative they had built for so long. Our relationship became a polite, distant dance. Holidays were strained. There was an unspoken elephant in the room: the betrayal, the lies told to my boss, and my subsequent success despite their efforts. Sometimes there were passive-aggressive comments, veiled criticisms, or attempts to downplay my achievements. But I had developed a shield. Their words no longer had the power they once did. My self-worth was no longer tied to their approval or lack thereof. It was built on my own experiences, my own achievements, and the validation of people who saw my true capabilities. The emotional impact of their actions lingered. The initial shock and hurt took a long time to process. There were days when the betrayal felt fresh, a raw wound. But as time passed, and I continued to build a life and career independent of their influence, the wound began to heal. It left a scar, a reminder of where I came from and the challenges I had overcome, but it no longer dictated my future. I learned incredibly important lessons from this experience. I learned that not all family dynamics are healthy, and sometimes the people closest to you can be the ones you need to protect yourself from the most. I learned the importance of trusting my own judgment and believing in my own abilities, even when others don't. I learned that true validation comes from within and from those who see and appreciate your authentic self, not from those who try to mold you into their limited perception. Setting boundaries, even with family, is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of self-preservation and self-respect. It is okay to distance yourself from toxic relationships, regardless of blood ties. My relationship with my family is irrevocably changed. There hasn't been a dramatic reconciliation where they saw the error of their ways and we embraced, tears streaming. That only happens in movies. In reality, sometimes people are incapable of that level of self-awareness or apology. Instead, there's been an acceptance of a new reality. We are family by name, but our emotional connection is guarded. I interact with them from a place of strength and detachment, no longer craving their approval or fearing their disapproval. My career continued to flourish under Mr. Harrison's mentorship. My performance remained strong, and I eventually received promotions and greater responsibilities. The irony was not lost on me. The job they tried to make me fail at became the very platform for my professional success and personal empowerment. The process of healing involved acknowledging the pain, processing the betrayal, and actively rebuilding my confidence stone by stone. It meant leaning on friends, seeking perspective, and focusing on the positive relationships in my life. It meant understanding that their behavior was a reflection of them, not of me. Today, I am grateful for the experience, as difficult as it was. It forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about my family and about myself. It pushed me to fight for my own narrative and to trust my own capabilities when the people closest to me wouldn't. It taught me resilience I didn't know I possessed. So, yes, they told my boss I'd fail. They tried their best to make it happen. But in doing so, they ignited a fire within me. A determination to prove them wrong, not for their sake, but for mine. And that determination, coupled with my hard work and the belief of a boss who judged me on my merits, led me to become her top performer. My success became my shield, my validation, and ultimately my freedom. This journey wasn't just about a job. It was about reclaiming my own story from the people who tried to write a different, smaller one for me. It was about finding my voice and using it, even when it shook. Thank you for listening to my story. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've ever had to stand up to family members who doubted or undermined you, please share your experience in the comments below. It helps to know you're not alone. If this story helped you feel seen or gave you hope, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about navigating challenging relationships and finding your strength. Your story matters, and your truth is powerful.